not right. Okay. Contention, what is the freight industry? The tomato price forward spends cross-border supply chain destroys 279,000 jobs. The junk iron 2-1. Why would the number be placed to more than 207,000 jobs by American workers such a critical part of Mexico tomato supply chain? This support the Mexican tomato supply chain includes restructured business, the fuel repair, entrepreneurs, and income providers, and it provides a chilling effect for a trade that dries up with Mexico as catastrophic for the supply chain and small can as well. The Commerce Department could be most punitive tariffs on Mexican tomatoes. But would have a chilling effect on trade that the companies involved in the supply chain they lose a good portion of business and protectionism in place. Two impacts. First, cross-border freight is key to the freight industry and overall economic stability. As Adler and 12 real companies are making big investment on both sides of the border to capitalize on moving trade as the economic groups all agreements with Mexico as cause for cheer. Kansas City, Southern U.S. We are reporting much bigger increase in cross-border shipping than the overall volume. Total cross-border freight by the train trucks surged nearly 35% the past 5 years, according to government data. And economic decline causes extinction. It's Berlinian 11. Conflict involving nuclear weapons may trigger the collapse of the economic system as a conversion with the consequence for racism with the first limited sovereignty, self-interest, rejection, and interference with the emptying multilateralism. Second, maintaining low prices key to chemical industry. Mexican growths are critical. That's IL in 11. And increased transportation rates and conservative companies dealing with the consequences of surging labor is dealing for the double whammy. There are certainly the risk of house, intermodal rail transportation, gaining favor shipments. Together, freight covered low cost recovery service that transports rail cars to the economic industry, having part as a new consequence of frequency consistent service that allows companies to better manage inventory and reduce costs. And chemical industry sells bioterror, that's NAS and 3. The guard against biological attacks we necessary to program and reliable methods of detection, new vaccines, new approaches, delivery, induction vaccines that will be carried out a recognition. Genmod pathogens we require research by companies and chemical industry warfare agents are extremely toxic and very vaccine chemical science must develop mineralogy and uses and information denies remedies bioterror results in extinction, strong risk. That's got limit 13. The bigger than my comfortable produces the engineer workers the biological engineering spread first source. The form of the fluid weapons among small GPs to procure instructions that can be found on the internet regimes the ability to exploit scientific methods for deadly aims to attack or drive mankind to extinction sinners and no longer widely impossible. Contention 2 is protectionism. There are two internal links. First, trade credibility, the price for destroys and cost retaliations. Rightly in labor to 12. The 96% minimum rights which makes it versus concealing of course nothing. The person 2 Mexico would surely retaliate the Mexico would be allowed to should be in favor of free trade, not protection of the government to guarantee consumers their rights. It is to spend without increase anything else. We ground trade policy given to Florida growers open up the door to future protectionism. As the young here 2-1. I think you see these are markets of the economy of Panama to growers in Florida covers opens the door of what growers get to do. Being recommended protection. The U.S. company said investing in them is irresponsible. However, comes to explain shielding the weak links. This precedent ensures a trade war. It's younger buyer to 1. The DOC recently been good faith concession exclusive. The main signals of danger. President broad trade war could do. Regular commerce risk the United trade war their second largest trading partner. And second, internal retaliation. They said they retaliate to the fullest extent. That's Corvus and 12. The Mexican government indicated will retaliate to the fullest extent. Dr. Mexican retaliation brought in comparison to the African trucking situation. Mexico placed tariffs on agriculture exports, and that destroys the economy and manufacturing. The ZNDB and 12. The U.S. is still recovering from self-inflicted wounds of unnecessary trade war with Mexico. And also, defend the starting at the tip of the nation, largest the trading partner, second largest export market. Mexico substituted the tariffs in 89 countries. Exports transmitted with a few prices, and the economy's made a gross renewed. Although we're going to convert to what Mexican imports is in case of drug resistance. Mexico retaliated if the U.S. imposes tariffs on exporters whose on manufacturing goods would be the hardest hit logistics and distribution center would be hard by a restriction of Mexican imports, and that destroys manufacturing base. It's Troika 13. If no further wins Mexico import heavy tariffs listed to the 9 after Troika's access to U.S. market, it would be hard present everything we import. President more political and off act not only retaliation but trade general competitiveness and North American joint manufacturing production inevitable is and low tariffs on manufacturing key to manufacturing clusters. Those are uniquely key to aerospace. As Prisoner and 12 using companies for new facilities. The Mexican companies can manufacture Mexico take advantage of free trade agreements. The country has companies who logistics networks this job. Mexico explains that other companies are building distribution centers in Mexico, interaction to border region industry, which allows foreign-based manufacturers to import material and equipment on duty and tariff-free basis. The country is heavily engaged in expansion in the aerospace. The federal government believes Mexico will become a place for national markets, and that's the foundation of air power, readiness, capabilities, key to crisis management. As national aerospace, we contend our industrial bases at the heart of our global supply of consistent defensive bases, specialized for the manufacturing and technology sectors. 1980 defense system are in replacement to China. I think it's crucial time to recapitalize military force. America must adapt defense to the threats on information networks, aerospace, and tools that help force and jurisdiction, communicate monitor critical facilities, advanced warming, air power, defense, overstructure, provides global force, mobility. This Lexington Institute 13. The U.S. has a capability to protect military power in multiple regions. The one thing that makes it superpower is air power. The U.S. is capable of deploying air with assets anywhere. The air power can hold at a risk any target in multiple directions. The Air Force is the only one capable of free, especially designed at conventional level. The U.S. is dominant air power in the world because of the aerospace industrial base. The U.S. military can dominate any place on the face of the earth. Its only desire is this air dominance enables this country to remain a superpower. It solves hard power by deterring rising challengers, bolstering every sector of the military. 3 impact scenarios is flat graph and 10. Today's security environment includes multiple nuclear activity, catalytic warfare, massive nuclear exchange. These U.S. can be drawn conflict growing because of North Korea, China, and Iran, and Japan, forces. U.S. need to develop extra weapons to country environments. This will increase the probability U.S. assets power protection. Thus, bolster deterrence. Speed, range, flexibility, air power has become indispensable. It possesses unique global mobility, will leverage trade. Ice and the benefits extending beyond operation among the airline, maritime, and cyber domains. Major challenges include WMDs, cyberspace attack, the Arctic security, entry dependence, and demographic shifts, resource wars, particularly over 1 billion states of bioagents are more lethal than global flashpoints, including North Korea and Iran and China. The proliferation of WMD is logical. Text and lose control. Taiwan starts to escalate toward North Korea, escalates. One of the also had become the instance rural air power plan, crisis management, and one North Korea conflict, 4 extinction warrants, Hayes and Pellegrin in 10. There's a possibility of nuclear attack with the brain intention, miscalculated reacts, and even eliminated nuclear changes result in a Holocaust on unprecedented nuclear attacks will cause a deeper ground and the temperature that needs time to less than 1,000 years. Hundreds of millions of people will die from hunger because a reduction in the ozone layer. The impacts are going to make the present global financial crisis appeal by comparison to subhuman. Unequal breakout within the lost control over war has in the aftermath of the chain reaction of effects involving other potential proliferators. It's in 2 Arctic conflict goes nuclear, the stables in 9. The Arctic is becoming the zone of increased military competition. Even over the fact that 2 nuclear weapons in the US and Russia emerged the Arctic having competing claims Canada, America, Iceland, and Norway in front of resolve the conflict escalating use of nuclear weapons. These claims together. Those have 3 China's gearing up for expansion, air power key to deter this Osland, and 11 China watches the fixing innovation first aircraft here. The Chinese Air Force may be challenging America's president in Asia. EPL has been transforming increasingly capable of fighting wars than more than 1,600 combat aircraft restoration of the Chinese flying speaking indication. Exercise this is designed to make the strength of the U.S. area. China's building capacity to direct bomb race of the Pentagon. Elsewhere, also be emboldening China's Air Force. Washington needs to maintain its air power. Superiority. China's overtaking the U.S. in aerospace power causes Asian nuclear war. Stokes 10. Likely Japan. Taiwan's China's capacity to conduct successful aerospace campaign. Air interventions suppressing defense of the U.S. Expansion of the third missile infantry air power systems. Japan does intervention the ability to dominate airspace. The potential great disability until political demands and strategic regional lines. We also have the fabric U.S. alliances. And from others consider WMP requires undercut piercings with theater muscle strategy. And Taiwan goes nuclear. This Colby Demar in all 13. Taiwan brings the most single possible dangerous source of conflict between the U.S. and China. Innovation continues. We set up the policy to prevent the independence. The U.S. maintains stability. Taiwan's defense level despite the situation remains. Combustible rapidly diversion military capabilities person, but extreme Taiwan's the contingency which should go up to become material failure, made down and Toronto legitimacy CP and the reliability of commitments to the region. But the internal link is reverse causal, a firm commitment against exploitation of anti-dumping conversions modeled by other countries and creates a stable investment climate for trade that's Corpus 12. The U.S. and Mexico need better ways to dispute the anti-dumping case of Mexican meat and more produce the case against the U.S. region, just like the U.S. demand groups having competitive advantage and not result trade to the defensive climate should be greater participation commitment and knowing producing a quality product competitive race we were Mexican producing invest in new tech and click their tomatoes superior the market share in the U.S. winter fresh market as a recent African country will never be able to push word which Brazilian investment opportunity and political influence is produced in trade sells war strong statistical and empirical support that's Griswold in 11 help us with the peace statement the number war structure of the investing in your local battles aspect trade people first reach first the trend towards democracies tend not to be fights with another as national companies more important nations have more to lose and war making wars and war means rupture trade transit and most less damage in the economy deeply the economy China Taiwan drawing these 2 governments close together keep the reckless nationalism jeopardizing kind of approach the trade regions as well as war trade as additionally acquire the exchange for the goes hard such as its middles from less important ocean another major war between European powers and major war times one of the pieces of 4-7 or Human Security Center documented a sharp number our complex genocides refugee numbers Gretzky over the representing country that can use wars level we can have freedom we can have freedom significant figures symbol trades we can have country feel that at least with states are 14 times this conflict ruling is the most retruth and 670 of the statements on trade global state trading nations cooperating to fight this doubling and trade reduces the possibility that the country will be involved in the conflict by 20% of the world's most performing regions are the truly school we cannot we want to ideal radical ideology we can agree where we can opportunity trade investment ties let's plan the United States Department of Commerce should remove the trade tomato price floor against Mexico. Yeah.
Cool. My first question. So tomatoes, they're pretty cool. I guess why are they key to the aerospace industry? So walk me through your internal link chain.
Okay, I was about to say tomatoes aren't key to the aerospace industry.
Great. How are tomatoes key to all trade?
Yeah.
Walk me through your internal link chain of the app because you access a lot through the aerospace industry.
Okay, of course.
Walk me to that.
Yeah, the ENEB evidence indicates that currently the United States is still recovering from wounds from the last trade war with Mexico that occurred during the 2009 economic crisis.
Wait, there was a trade war then? Why didn't your impacts happen?
Right, because it wasn't retaliated to the fullest extent as per our Corvus evidence.
Wait, why is retaliation going to happen now then?
That would be as per the Corvus evidence because it brings up the justifications that the trade war in the past occurred. Now,
yeah, that card is 3 sentences. It says the Mexican government indicated it will retaliate to the fullest extent. Talk to a Mexican retaliation.
Right, the Youngmeyer evidence also indicates the same claim.
Where does this okay, why does that make the what's the comparative claim as to why they will do that now? All it says now is the government indicated. Where is your substantial evidence saying this will happen?
Youngmeyer evidence indicates if the DOC refuses to accept good faith, it signals a dangerous precedent that could ensure a broad trade war breakout. Commercial risks.
Then what's different now from 2009?
Now it's different because specifically the Mexican growers are pushing for removal of the tomato price floor specifically, as well as in this world there will be punitive tariffs on the manufacturing industry.
Okay, so first we stop the price floor. people are happy, tomatoes are cheaper because there's no price floor. That leads to no trade war. Then walk me through the rest of this. So there's no trade war and protectionism.
Right. Like the punitive tariffs that Mexico would impose would destroy the United States manufacturing base.
Why?
As per. Oh, okay. Because like the competitiveness of the North American like joint manufacturing system is critical as per this trade.
Like
as per
what?
this trading
What
union.
specifically about Mexico is key to our manufacturing base?
Okay, right. Because the NAFTA trucks access the U.S. through markets through Mexico, and in the
So
world of these
just
tariffs,
our
we would,
trade-
we would pay higher prices on everything that we would need. In order
So
to
NAFTA
manufacture.
trucks. So Canada and Mexico would lose their trade. Okay, what's the next
Incorrect.
internal link?
The
So
evidence
manufacturing.
beforehand, like the sentence beforehand specifically cites the Mexico scenario.
Yes, so we lose trade with Mexico. That's what I'm saying. Okay, next, manufacturing breaks down. What leads to the aerospace? Like, why does all aerospace industry break down, especially like these strong military aerospace that we currently have?
These current manufacturing companies use logistic networks that ship from their Mexico-based.
But I mean, we
plants.
already have the strongest air force. Like, where is there a uniqueness? We're
Yeah,
losing?
that's the National Aerospace Week evidence indicates that as per our 1980s defense system, it's currently not being it's not being invested in, so that we can update it. In 2010 to 19 is the critical nexus point as to when we need to ensure that we have a strong air power sector.
Cool. That's fair.
Do you need prep? Are you ready?
Is it on the jump drive?
It's on the jump drive.
Cool. No, it's one off.
Okay,
What? One off.
Just one off. Just one off.
just one.
Sorry, I just broke my timer. I thought the timer.
Oh, that's fine. I don't even have it up yet.
Is everybody ready?
The affirmatives use economic control with this production and profit are prime examples of a neo-technical mindset set on controlling the world. This will make it impossible to ever have a different mindset infused with the planet. Style 97. Research endlessly extracting stock, distributing direct form according to a logic which is not that of need, but of inflated desires and consumption fantasies, artificially created by the technologies of our post-industrial era. Nothing falls outside this technological organization. Neither politics nor science, nor even math. It is organizing conditions of optimistic performance and ultimate plan, whether politics, the global economics, or culture and ideology. Under this way, technology is no other than one that produces results, no other reality than that of use and profits. This very well Rex's instrument of his domination of the will of the whole earth. Politics so conceived matters insofar as they bear upon the contribute to the overall condition of our common planetary existence, global identity, global interdependence, determinative. Oh wait, no, that's not right. I'm so sorry. Today's man no longer has the idea to see what is essential, can no longer bring discrete echo preceding which results in thinking and politicizing alone. All tips in global politics, principles, and ontology to which inform all following action. I on the world order studies inherently draw a calculated technological mindset. All African claims are premised on ontology and calculation must be confronted before we can enact change. Swaza 02. World order studies are steeped in strategic calculation. They do not concern themselves with task and reflective insight, the fundamental features of the age. They do not concern themselves with the ground that enables thinking and doing so produced by science, natural or social. It is the enabling ground that presupposes an ontology. World order studies are dependent on one another one or another ontological commitment. They are determined by the ontological position to prevail in modern period of Western philosophy. They are taking position fundamentally decisive and profound change in take place in humanity's self-understanding conception that is content of our world and in relation to the world order studies deal with beings that are said to be political. Politics so conceive matters insofar as they bear upon the contribute the overall condition of our common planetary existence. Global identity, global independence are determinative and outlook concerning political existence. The distinction of domestic and international spheres go rather anachronistic, remaining only useful for the purpose of analysis and investigation of the science of politics and presently empirically oriented methodology. Political science poses and advance the various political things that constitute objects of investigation. Political science can be said to be dependent on regional political ontology, political ontology, theoretical inquiry, to order the meaning of these ethicals that provide subject matter review, political science, and via positive science. The basic structure of such an area worked out in such a fashion are precise different ways of experiencing and interpreting the dominant domain of being in which the area of the subject matter itself is conferred. Basic concepts the perfect way we get an understanding beforehand of the subject matter, unlike all objects as the science takes to the theme. All positive investigation is guided by this understanding. Only after these concepts are grounded, this preliminary research signifies nothing in the interpretation of these entities with regard to their basic state being. And security necessitates endlessly exploring threats in order to justify its own existence. Collect calculated level to increase the large-scale war on difference which will apply. The uniformity being arrived from the emptiness of the abandoned inner being, which is only a matter of chemical security and order, in order which subjugates the will, the uniform conditions everyone in advance of all national differences, the uniformity of leadership. Government politics are simply further means of directing way of life according to the plan. Homeland security, insofar as it destroys the very thing it claims to protect, is nothing opposed to terrorism, but the consummation of its leaders. Their attempts to secure the world against terrorism only serve further drive the world towards a homogeneous state. The elimination of all difference in standard reserves, all the elimination of national differences serve the identity of threat. Terrorism, the greatest quest for security. Security is for those who do not, those who know that they can be injured, for those who can be damaged. Security can only be found in the acknowledgement of one's threat condition, and this means that can only be found in recognition of being as a threat. Security means that we preserve this threat, and that means we must act in the office of the preservers. Preserving a thing means not challenge it for the technological availability to let it maintain an essential concealment. This will can only devastate the other. True security can only be found in preservation of the threat of being. It is when we are busy being with security measures and frantic organization resources that we directly assault the things we should or should preserve. The rest of the question is arrest from the economic cycle and circulated the standard reserve. This technological underworld, this situation of total war is precisely the area of restlessness. Annihilation is impossible for this world, and so is security. Terror experience today is a clue to the withdrawal of being within the framing of being and the circulation of standard reserve. What is already had been destroyed. What already is been destroyed. Terrorism is merely other confirmation at this point. One politician terrorists call for the bystander reserve. The plan will reach everyone everywhere. Human resources are no different than livestock. But with this, an evil worth the death has already taken place. Human resources do not die, they perish. This very act of war depends on technological thought. Its very nature is based on the foundation of the technological mindset. It's the use of force and violence to control and manage other nations and people to follow our will. Vertical 7. Word existence are intertwined. Discourse, it is deemed necessary to use force in defense of one's right to exist, and it is possible to do so. To translate military matters to bullet guns in a controlled and rational way. This rationalist form of state reasons that most commonly takes place under the name of strategy. War is a mere continuation of policy by other means. War is an act of force to compel enemy to do our will. A world subsumed by technological that destroys our ontological relationship in such a way that things cease to be in any meaningful way. The value that human beings are lost, that we lose our connection with the world and other beings. The standing reserve obliterates the essential being involved in things. It makes total planetary discussion radically less important issue and likely inevitability turning your existence extinction scenarios. Caputo 93. Next is the explanation to talk about what it could be does not see that what is launching in place and was already happened expels itself at the last emission of the bomb and its explosion. The thinker is menaced by a more radical explosion as such. That explosion of that I talk about would be but its last objection, which will put an end to all life on Earth. Explosion occurs in the being. Things that cease to true nearness and farthest are something the difference of which is being a great distance away. Nearness can be experienced in the quiet meditative nearness. The real destruction thing, the one that abolishes the most essential being. The more essential annihilation occurs even if the bomb never goes off. The bomb's explosion is a confirmation of long annihilation of the thing. What is long been annihilated their thingness, the mushroom clouds of the bomb cannot be far behind. What is essential is the loss of genuine nearness. Annihilation of planetary life can be confirmation to be a follow, and after that, less subtle counterpart to ontological destruction. A loss of value of life precedes all other impacts. Death is preferable to a valueless life. Mitchell 05. That is just response by which the world becomes a desert. Insanity expands, it seemingly extends to the end. The lifeless desert is a beingless desert. The world that becomes lifeless desert is a consequently unworld where things have withdrawn. Annihilation far less concerned with devastation. Mere annihilation swept aside all things, including even nothingness, with devastation of the contrary earth spreads everything that the blocks and prevents. Evil is the devastation of the earth, the annihilation of the human essence that goes along with it. Devastation does not annihilate, but brings about something worse and unworld. Without limit, the desert unworld spreads, ever worsening and incessantly urging itself to new expression of malevolence. Annihilation will bring respect in the perverse sense relief. Devastation is also irreparable, no salvation can arrive for it. Here's the alternative text. Reject the act's managerial post issue and instead act into Heideggerian resistance. Heideggerian resistance recovers the earth as a side of open possibilities, allows us to follow the earth without manipulate. Dronian 11. Also, including our contemporary metaphysics, sojourn in the planetary machination takes place through the side of unfolding. To overcome the violent manipulation of the earth and the planet goal, we need to recover the hidden event that appropriated the machination from the abyssal latitude in the first place, but also to show how this fundamental abyssal realm of openness is connected to the earth side aspect of unfolding. An alliance between non-violent, letting be of the earth and thinking, the remembering of the original abyssal groundlessness of being. This incorporation of an abyssal being follows the earth without violently manipulating. Heideggerian resistance is a critique of prevailing world disclosure, the manipulative grounding planetary machination that attempts to explicitly rationalize the capital, abiding control, and security. Such resistance world disclosure of machination marks the side of non-violent letting be of the open and abyssal earth. The overcoming contemporary epoch of planetary machination requires a power-free letting be of the violent machination implicates. Heideggerian resistance acts as a radical rejection of the technological frame, opening a world of possibilities for new modes of dwelling in the world. Dronian 11. Letting be refers to human release from the manipulative molding of things, and the recognition and rejection will rule of machination. Though letting it be as a counterpower of machination becomes simply rejected. It is not the letting of the transformation of being into such other being other beginning, which are where being unfolds as power free as a modality other than a violence at a power end, where the earth is not forced under our orderings and calculations. Letting be indicates a rational negation of machination that interrupts total and perfectly functioning unfolding. The component of rejection eventually brings out the abyss of groundlessness of being, which grants us the possibility of dwelling in a totally different way.
Okay, come read this card. Sorry, I'll flash this to you guys. Sorry.
Okay.
And we cannot base our policy choices alone off statistical analysis alone. We must complete the ontological question about being before we can come to a conclusion about reality. Oliver 07. Any responsible human being who has taken note of the current state of affairs cannot, should not avoid making use of every possible means to create and expand informed awareness of the situation, well sense urges the need to act among many possible factual as possible. Factual analysis is not sufficient to have the desire for to galvanize people to action by placing information about the precarious state of the earth in the context not only of philosophical, theoretical, but also crucially critical psychological interpretation. People are afforded the knowledge, psychological, ethical meaning to appreciate what this information means for them and to other creatures on the planet.
Cool. I'll flash that card.
Yeah, can we just get that before conflict starts?
Yeah. Let me quick get it on its own document. Can I have a drunk drive, guys? And then I'll give it to you.
Thank you so much.
What you need? Jump drive?
Yeah.
Oh.
Oopsie, I don't. Trying to get a new document so I can get this to you all.
I'll start it out. I'll look at it. Alright. Okay. So the link is ontology, correct?
Wait, what?
What?
The link is the link ontology based?
The link is your attempt to economic control.
And your attempts to solve war through control of the state. We also read a link to your usage of IR without this type of questioning. Also your criticism of terrorism, your pursuit of security. We also criticize your utilitarianist framework.
Okay. How does the alternative solve for your criticism of our utilitarian framework?
One of the things that we talk about is considering ontology and then consider things beyond just a calculus, not just how things work first, but the intrinsic qualities of things around.
Okay, how does that solve for our justifications of utilitarianism? You didn't answer my question.
What do you mean? How do we
How
solve
does the
your
alternative
intention?
address your criticism of our utilitarianism?
Heideggerian resistance is a question of sequencing. It's a question of how we approach policy action. Heideggerian resistance would have us approach policy in a way that we don't first think about manipulation, but we first think of how we got to this place and
How does the
who we are helping
How does the
and why
affirmative
we
think
are
about
helping.
manipulation?
Huh?
How does the affirmative think about what part of the affirmative is manipulation?
I mean, it's calculative in its logic, in its control sense. You manipulate by trying to assume that you're going to be able to solve every security issue through tomato price floors, if I have that correctly. You also read links on how the United States military power is key to deterring 4 different scenarios for nuclear extinction.
Okay, so so it's an issue of our predictions are not sound, correct?
It's not a question of prediction, it's how you approach that policy and how you come to those conclusions.
I.e., predicting that we're going to be able to solve for
No,
the
you come
events.
there you come in a way in which you try to manipulate the earth for the advantage of the affirmative without first asking ontological questions.
How does the affirmative manipulate the earth?
Sam, do you want to go over the links again?
First of all, we talk about the ways that you manipulate reality, using the state to change these things because you feel like you can solve for all these different things. The way you use it,
How does that manipulate the earth?
The earth, everything around us. You try to attempt to control nations with the U.S. military. You try to create economic control by stopping trade wars and protectionism for the benefit of the affirmative plan. Instead of asking why those things are bad in general, you also try to manipulate security issues and securitize the entire world by trying to save us all and thinking of it only in terms of extinction, nuclear war, bioweapons
What's the
and
status of the
bioterrorism.
alternative?
Huh?
What's the status of the alternative?
Conditional. It's obviously unconditional. It's obviously unconditional.
Yeah, the alternative result in the F, or something like the F.
It's a question of sequencing. We say your F in this instance is bad. There could be things, if you have this questioning first.
Brett? Yes.
you guys have it up, and then I'll give the roadmap.
Order?
Okay. It's gonna be freight, then the K.
For framework, do you want a separate flow for that instead of putting it on the K proper? Just for like clarity issues for everybody.
That's probably good.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay, cool.
So can you signpost when you come to framework then?
Yeah.
Just do
Because that can be
freight.
the top.
Do, yeah,
Freight,
do freight
framework,
framework.
K.
Sweet. All right, thank you.
Anybody need that repeated, or is everybody good to go? Sounds good.
First on freight, extend that the point that absent complying it would destroy jobs. That's hung and that leads to the chilling effect. That's what Malkin specifically indicates, and this is specific to like foreign investment. That's what Adler indicates, and that's saving the economy because freight industry freight solves extinction because of trade routes with Mexico. That's
Key to the economy, self-extinction, or the framework.
interpretation of the role about should it be decided the political hand in the status quo or competitive policy option. This is a voting issue for three reasons. A, predictably, the resolution chooses the framework to center around the federal government policy adoption. That's only predictable from source alternatives arbitrary and run the affirmative who are just in one C. And B, burdens alternative GA weighted the education in Shively 2000. This kind of limited agreement starting agreement contested obey the conscience of meaningless, a lack of agreement, although it being contested. And C, blind focus our framework ensures a stable locus of links comparison of alternatives make confusion, judge intervention, and destroys both subject and classroom policy and topics specific education K proper. All fails. Heidegger's ontology can't be applied out of theory. Rule in 90. Heidegger's inability to conceptualize social and historical determinants, security, modern technology, resolve discussion questions, state of concrete, and the philosophy of the philosophy of existence, characterization for the sphere of ontology, like the degraded, the priority resulting about oscillation, the income and aesthetic ontology, both desirability, the possibility of effective translation, middle level ontology, potential rule on setting concrete and problematic on the offset, the intellectual evaluation ontology about the ontonic plane, virtually close conceptual space, where in real history might be thought it might be a period after thought the ontology being in time still bound metaphysics that rejects and perm do both, but Drew 92 from the philosophy point of view, the practical little dimension and the where the ecological point of view, the theoretical little dimension, the reaction, but deeper deflection, the effects of action not to contradict each other, so shield and solvable consequences of it converted by knowledge decision and still decision have consequences and nuclear aware or ways ontology is a prerequisite to examination. Macaulay 96. Heidegger claims that there are greater danger to the traditional life on earth than war. It's hard to imagine anything more dangerous to the total destruction of the biosphere. Heidegger remains part of the human-centered tradition and one of our combating so highly distant contribution massive affection and thing. Heidegger with London of the contribution made by the horns of life exchange the human concept ontological awareness and preferable on exchange of the new core. And Heideggerian criticism exemplifies a form of paganist thought, replicates suppression dichotomy. This results in the cruelest forms of nationalism, socialism, and xenophobia. Goth year 4. The pagan cast Heidegger sought to rise to the persistent emphasis on the world that would assimilate to Heidegger's persistent focus of the corresponding attempt to rediscover the attempt to read the mystery to this managerial behavior in such a place in special consideration gains independence of mystery demands to respect and love the problem that Heidegger's man the pagan read letters with the generosity and stand problem that afflicts the past, present, and the future for audience pagan cruelty risks the ultimate source of all cruelty pagan completes the national political false naturalism and the consequence of the pagan overruling church law and all sacrifice the pagan sacrifice draws the exposes the same to the privilege and is despised outside of the national foreign economy and scourged by pagan the toxic source from which the real pathology national chauvinism and xenophobia originally and perm due to the all mutually excluded parts of the plan. This recognition of the flaws of the positive is still captures the positive effects. Kidner 1. Unless we are entirely have to use whatever materials available with team to ideology, then we reverence citation the provisional tongue-in-cheek sentence question the virtues of the industry and reject the team Heidegger's the Nazi and perm double ID the blind embrace the alt and all and see alt is strong enough to suffer the residual link alt is not strong enough to solve what they claim and ontology does not outweigh nuclear war or a war in general. It is warrantless, logically incoherent, and would serve the conversion of nuclear war always lost of being because a man survived Christ is only to be alerted in nuclear war. There will be no clever and contented animals left and their ontology is flawed. Graham 99. In the exchange questions of ontology arguments toward the internalists of the popular
sex, ontology, features, evolution, anarchy, ontology, metaphysics, descriptive the role of social performance, specific kinds of politics, identity, politics, reduction, thought, he thinks it has product, thought, he brings it sensible to the need to be thought, and what's subject to the need to live in a non-child, and apparent, negates the role of society, responsibility, voice, and things of the people, the result, the tension and social limit, distraction, problem, to inconseparable parts, and the perm self, the world of technology can operate within Heidegger's idea. The alternative Heidegger is not opposed to technology, just questions the way it's about it. As long as we consider the meaning of technology to our own making, we can avoid the dangers it presents. Carino 9. The benefit of modern technology beyond overstated. Heidegger himself is not discontinuing. Heidegger does not oppose to technology. Turn does not propose resubdividing primitive in the Neanderthal age. And the alt framework argues over the determination debate runs, prevents action on social problems, culminates in extinction, their retreat to the local is depoliticized from the form of politics that fragments macro political circles. Politics 97. Many analysts share one thing in common: false empowerment comes to measure and impulsive company by loss of public control, deplete capacity of individuals like group to work for a social interest problem, ecological corrective property, or mitigate spread of infectious disease. Now they understood a larger scale global guide. The widespread retreat in politics come with time and they do know the global reality is far more reducing the time and capital. The fate of the world hangs in the balance and unyielding truth. Even though ethos and anti-political more compelling and mere declaration of alternative does nothing. They have no mechanism to enact their worldview. Murray 97. The assertion carried a little way with it. You can specify exactly the alternatives and how they might be achieved. It seemed justified to grounding potentially the current unreasonable was in the way of seeking more proximity of the fostering mutual understanding and stable balance of power offers something tangible rather than empirical promise to like a shred and sport critical depends on the which are a little bit more than wishful thinking there in a double bind. They don't solve case limits where impacts against a critique or they play utopian fiat which are voted for anything voted for equity and a situation like solving world hunger which is possible for it after winning against me least a floating pitcher or abuse an independent voter for time and scratch you see just like severance permutation gain any offense and predictions avoid a state of permanent emergency. This allows us to reclaim our agency from passivity. Bindy 2000. To adopt a running as the reserve future generation reactive policy by choosing not to forecast the condoms result capacity dependency ultimately the opposite is non-existent by treating forecast result of period reactive is in a sense strong message policy make diverge or its object of policy is the future nothing to future injustice committed against generation present future and belief in indefinite uncertainty dooms us to paralysis weaken scenario constructed based on the best available evidence to reach necessary conclusions. The alternative collapses hedge open higher 12. We could excluding complexity and what have knowledge to do what we expose the country to great harm and adversity, getting better disseminating dependence on the knowledge on the vote of the two parts represented the better organized new information policy means really matters try to extend the reach conclusions and make decision expert underestimate the degree of future value with the intended dismiss signs of current tensions and zero construction to be interactive trying to brainstorm among experts and policymakers after alternatives here and plausible distinct the future challenging the better mindsets of different paths which may unfold and improve early recognition of uncertainty which reaches paralysis among certain concern improving quality of foreign policy succession and permanent the plan to understand that it is being done for the wrong reason and that to win the predictions are impossible not just difficult to suspect. 4. The pessimism critique lies on a complete lack of information. This is not supposed to seem uncertainty of nothing less we have the slightest severe remedies, but despite the uncertainty still the intuition we should try to save as many spots in the spinning critiques to learn only when they have absolutely no idea of the future and any shift away from realism and collapse in the impact of distinction. Mere charmer 1. The optimist comes security competition war to great powers burned out of the system wrong effect of major states of the globe still cared about the balance of power realism and offering the most powerful explanation in their response to the activity. States with the picture to gain the power to these the dispense to international and the credit derived for great power does not change the end of the cold and if you send such into likely soon there is such word on security competition among great powers that might lead to a wage war and perm to the blind all parts of the eternal that don't exclude realism and perm themselves and that beneficial abandoning realist traditions not necessary step to solving the criticism. Williams 5. The problems of political life are like a natural opinion on the systemic and moral question will from realism attempts to account for the social political consequence of the probability assess the danger and opportunity the right from willful realistic with the resolution of social political world transforming that is example under the new foundation of political principles social practice and their framework seeds of political Churchill 96 medicine the district department during rapidly light of business benefits comprehension ultimately to divide rather than united drawn and loved into what they said and how they've set a decision on whether they even do work in the party continue upon the inheritance of vernacular determine direct expenditure doing something that have a principle be meaningful religious illusion about disruption time to get the nonsense. Also with the positive change and discourse doesn't shape policy meaning to Lucille 96. The discourse turns into but distinct and so different in the constitute distinct policy making subject to demonstration. The discourse again to the assumptions representation to making it possible that political military and the institution and critical fudges and starting to discourse the like institute social law material and culture and political geopolitical economies with particular research strategy becomes significant case outweighs a newbie's value to life claim we can might destroy some of the value of life today but they can recover in a week you can't recover and value to life and now it'll burn scene 2. There is a basic value to life inherent in order being itself a permanent again is the opposite of life of the life is expressed contradiction not being the permanent the binding obligation for the binding modern technology transport the consequence of the action on the line permanent religion and long validity to use the technology can destroy the environment required life of not common condition and not unconditioned and humanity on earth. You got 2 seconds. Oh, process. Process.
Okay, so I'm just gonna make sure the perms that you read are perm to both perm do the alternative, or perm do the plan, then the alt and all others. Perm, plan, and all non-mutually exclusive parts of the plan, and then plan and all
Non-mutually exclusive parts of the all.
of the alt. So like, isn't that kind of the perm above the alternative to the plan?
No.
Okay, so like, what parts of the plan do you exclude in that permutation?
What plan are we talking about? The alternative text?
No, like, so what parts of the plan are not mutually exclusive with the alternative?
Like specifically.
Just because you reframe the mindset,
Yeah,
you
just-
hit the augmented assumptions.
And then, so you read fourth, right? The fourth one is plenty of the other parts that don't exclude realism.
Yeah, yeah.
That's so criminal.
No, go ahead.
How you doing today?
Doing pretty well. Made it to finals.
Yeah, dude, nice. Congratulations. Good
Ask
good.
about paganism. Actually, ask questions.
Details about agonism.
Okay. The card that we one sec. Let me find it. What's the author name? Sorry, I've got a lot of
It's
cards.
the Gauthier
Gauthier.
.4.
Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. So Heideggerian criticism exemplifies paganist thought, which leads to dichotomies that results in nationalism, chauvinism, xenophobia, and these persist over and over again.
Yeah,
And
like, we know
because
you
of-
can read we know you can read the tag. Where in Heidegger's philosophy is he paganistic, and what part of the philosophy?
It's the religious followings that happen from Heidegger.
So like
It's not
people
as
who like
flawed as
Heidegger
people who
are
like Heidegger.
paganistic, and so we have to.
No, it's Heidegger's persistent focus on the world that contains his corresponding attempt to rediscover man's natural habitat is one such place that bears special consideration, contains an impenetrable mission to men's
Like you can read. We understand that you can read the card, but like why?
What part of his philosophy? You're saying that you're arguing that he wants to like go out into the wilderness. Where in the 1 and C do we argue that?
It's just specific to like Heidegger in general.
Okay, you read that Heidegger is a Nazi. Is there any impact to his?
No, it's just a reason to reject it.
It was a joke.
It's a joke, so you're not going for it. I don't have to spend time on
We're
it.
not gonna actually
It
make
was-
it a voting issue.
Yes.
So,
Although he was a Nazi, just let everybody know.
We've seen ridiculous answer to that.
Yeah, we know you got like a 6-point block.
Some people are serious. Yeah, I just don't.
Anything else?
Do you have any more questions?
yeah, I'm looking for something. I'm looking at something.
Okay, there's like 15 seconds.
Ask them how we collapse edge.
How do you collapse edge?
Or we collapse.
Or how do we collapse edge?
Specifically, it's the complexity of knowledge and how that replicates.
Cool. Are we in this?
Yeah.
Starting now. Stop prep.
Bill 318.
Cool.
Do you have the flash drive?
No, I don't.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah. I don't need the flash drive, I said.
Oh, whoops.
I quit.
Eh.
I'm sure you-
I'm gonna bring that over here.
That's fair.
It's just gonna be the K proper. So like not with the framework stuff. I'll signpost too because it's gonna be a mess. But I will signpost. I'm going straight down with a little bit of extensions at the beginning. Is everybody ready? Cool. Cool. The Heidegger critique is a criticism of their method of policymaking. The judge should decide between two methods of policymaking when we approach these level of questions. The first of which is the affirmative policy, in which using calculated mindset to approach policy in a utilitarian frame-making perspective in which they want to try to do the affirmative plan at the expense of utilitarian calculus and saving bodies and stopping wars and security. It's the level of the impact or the link level of the debate. But the alternative to this is approaching it at an ontological level. First asking the question of who we are, how we got there, and why we are doing what we are doing for the affirmative plan. Without asking these questions first, will lead to the criticism of forgetting ontology at the expense of having a calculated ground on the impact level of the debate. Extend Caputo in 93, which makes two claims. The first with a value to life claim. This for non-whitewashing of ontology makes it so that individuals don't have a value to life because they are constantly set aside and they're thought of as object in the mind of the affirmative policy making plan because there's just another object to be manipulated and a body to be counted in the affirmative plan that makes them have no value. They try to make the claim that value to life is inevitable, but this is untrue in the level of that nobody in the state or the organization of policy making is actually addressing people as actually they're pushed aside and rejected from society in the form of thought of the affirmative. The sub-point is that justification, the whitewashing ontology, not thinking people as people, but as objects to be manipulated and calculated, is the only thing that will justify nuclear apocalypse and extinction in and of itself. That this is a conceded war. The only way extinction to happen is the framing of the affirmative plan. That because it turns the entirety of the affirmative plan, it goes conceded means it's try or die for the alternative. At best, we can solve through the criticism with a risk of getting the value to life. Now, do not let them get back from the what they are, or don't let them get back from the strategy choices in the negative block or depending on the 2AC answers, allowing them new arguments to justify sandbagging, which makes it impossibly negative. They cannot get back from this. They conceded that this form of thought leads to extinction because it allows for the justification of extinction. That means the best you can do is vote for the alternative and hope to have a value of life impact. Now go to the link level of debate. First, you're going to extend to Boozy in 2000, or to Boozy, which says that the control of the economics, trying to lift restrictions and price floors, it's just trying to control the economy so the betterment of the United States so that we continue to grow throughout the economy. That puts things in economic terms of good and bad, and it puts things in terms of money, and which we can calculate everything in terms of money. They do this in the affirmative plan by saying that we need to remove this at the expense of the affirmative plan. That type of manipulation of the economy is an inherent link. The basic point is Swazo. It said that when we approach IR without first answering an ontological question, we are reproducing the same logic that happened again and again. That's going to be a eternal link term in the affirmative plan because they're again and again going to use the same logic that led to the extinction scenarios they tried to solve without answering an ontological question that allows us to solve. That is a terminal deficit to their framework too because their framework justifies the endless renewal of policies that implicate the impacts of the affirmative plan. The only way to break away from this is the alternative is try or die. The CISA point is terrorism. The Mitchell evidence says that we are addressing terrorism an ontological issue, and that leads to never being able to solve terrorism because we aren't addressing why the people are becoming terrorists or bioterrorists. We are only trying to solve the problem. That means we can't ever solve we can never solve in the long term, and it'll always keep reproducing, which means they're going to have terminal solvency deficit. The CISA point is that solving and trying to defend wars for the security of the United States and thinking of it in utilitarian logic justifies looking at everything as something to be manipulated and secured in and of itself that turns their war impacts. That's the only thing that allows for the justification of war. It's going to reproduce itself again and again so that we defend wars that aren't there in the hope of trying to secure our own life. Now, these all go conceded as links. Do not let them come back, for they have a 100% conceded link in impact, which means try or die for the alternative. Also, they conceded the war in Turkey's in the impact. Now, they read a whole piece of evidence. They read a... Why is my... They rated Woolen piece of evidence, but the Woolen evidence had no warrant as to why Heidegger's theories of technology failed. He prefer a reason why technical mindset explained above for this two subpoint is that Woolen advocates an expansion of the instrumental policy, essentially advocating the expansion of the technical mindset. And the reason that we win the technical mindset is bad is the reason Woolen's alternative magnifies the link exponentially. 3, Woolen would say that Heidegger's will to will only confuse the issue. Clearly, he does not understand Heidegger's writing because he's not talking about the will, but he's sequencing argument of what questions we ask. 4 subpoint is that criticism rests on the inaccurate representation of Heidegger's ontology as passive. We argue for an active resistance. That's a good place to put the alternative. Extend the Geronin evidence right here. Alternative is Heideggerian resistance, which approaches policymaking in a new way in which we ask the ontological questions before we proceed with making decisions. Now, that does not mean that we cannot do things in the future. That is not a passive. We can still have policy action that tries to solve things in the future. But first, we have to ask the ontological question, which means that we can still solve back things like hegemony and negative impacts, while still not being passive, but actively asking about ontology. Now, they say that nukes outweigh value to life, but they extend the Caputo and Mitchell evidence to make comparative play. If we have no value to life, then we're not going to be able, or we don't want to live. In fact, living is comparatively bad for us. It's in a negative field of enjoyment because we have to keep on living when there is no value or reason to keep living. That's comparatively worse. The Mitchell evidence and the Caputo evidence also says that when we don't see people as having value to life, it leads to nuclear war, which turns that impact. Now, go to paganism. Cross-except, they have no reason why Heidegger's paganism. They just say he's generally paganism. We're not trying to go out in the woods like this car Iceland. Heidegger's a Nazi. Cool. They say releasement leads to passivity. Extend the interpretation of the alternative. The Geronin evidence very specifically not a passive engagement, it's an active resistance in which we try to approach things at an ontological level. And first, we must reject the technological mindset, the jump to try to approach problems without understanding the problem first and in and of itself. And that is going to turn back the affirmative plan that's going to turn back the passivity argument because we're still able to do action after we ask the right question. And once we understand how we got to the problem, that means we're going to turn that and actually be able to solve better. Now, they say we have a flawed ontology through their evidence. We actually do solve that. I explained it, but there's no warrants in this evidence why our ontology is flawed. More so, constant questioning means that we're going to be able to solve. The Carino evidence is actually evidence confirming Heidegger and the alternative. We need to constantly question ontology, otherwise we're not going to be able to understand ontology. They say we ignore action to read see the political. That's their Boggs evidence. They also read it at the end of the debate. 1, we don't have to defend all of Heidegger. The warrants in this card is that Heidegger's rejection of democracy leads to this, but we do not reject democracy in this current instance. We already total rejection of political engagement. More so, we're just a question of how we should engage in the political. The suicide point is political engagement and technological mindset sucks. The thesis of our criticism, we can do it better. The force point is not unique. The right is already taking power. Look all around you. There's only a risk that the alternative can do things differently by looking at the world. Next, and to do this argument with extreme suspicion, Suazo indicates that the current IR and current politics are stuck in the way on ontology and tries to reproduce itself, which means that the only way to break away from the current right politics is by voting for the criticism. Now, they say we have no mechanism. Geronin cards a very specific act. It is a question of method, how we approach policy making and how we as individuals make these decisions is a very active ontology in which we continuously ask questions so that we can defend better policies in the future. It's a question of the method you are using to approach policy making. They say that Heidegger's ontology kills agency. This is fundamentally false. That's the Bindi evidence. He has a flawed interpretation of what portion of Heidegger we are reading. The Geronin evidence myth is extremely explicitly clear when he said that currently under technological mindset there are no individuals, there are only objects to be manipulated and the earth to be calculated and controlled for the expanse of human gain. Now, the Geronin evidence says the comparative alternative to this is to approach things on an ontological level in which we can embrace the individual and understand that people are people for actual reasons other than just units of calculation. That allows us to have a better understanding of who people are and what agency is, meaning we're going to turn the Bindi evidence. Now, they say the political. I already answered this on the Boggs piece of evidence. They say that discourse doesn't shape reality, that it doesn't make any sense in the context of Heidegger. We're critiquing their mindset and the way in which they're framing impacts in the debate. We aren't criticizing their discourse in the round. Now, they say that there's always a value of life. I explained this, but I'll reiterate it here because it's an important point. There may always be a possibility for people to get value of life, but when the system systematically excludes them from policy-making decisions and does not even approach them as actual people, they feel disenchanted with the system and they feel pushed aside. The Mitchell evidence also makes this plain comparatively clear when it says that there is a desert of ontology in the technological mindset because we continuously move forward when we aren't being addressed by actual people. We're kicked out of society in the technological mindset. All policy-making decisions think of people as non-people. There's no way to have value to life in a system in which we are constantly excluded. More so, it is a secondary question because they still concede when we turn the impacts of the affirmative plan, which means it's try or die for the alternative.
Okay.
Cool.
That you result in policy action, is that a floating pick or just like
Like, we aren't going to claim to solve for your individual advantages because
so it's just like
this is a criticism of how you are framing like policy in general in this route.
So it's like policy actions can just persist. In the
Like,
future, correct?
this is
that
like a-
what you'll defend?
What?
Is it policy actions can persist in the future? Is that-
Yes, policy actions can
Okay.
persist in the future.
But it's not a floating paper.
Yeah.
We're not claiming to solve the affirmative, we're critiquing your method
Yeah.
in this round.
Okay, so if the Heideggerian resistance recovers Earth as a site for open possibilities, like how does the method of the alt like key in any instance? Like, because you say that, like, you respond to Murray that it's method that's key. How is this method key to anything? Can you just like?
Yeah, I think the second piece of Gironin evidence we read in the 1NC is actually very descriptive and like picturesque when it describes it. He says that this Heideggerian resistance is a very active, like powerful, I think he uses the word radical negation of the technological mindset, one in
It
which
says
we have to
being
approach it.
unfolds as being power free. If something's like power free, what does that world look like?
What do you mean?
The second piece of Gironin evidence.
Oh,
It
let me
says,
go to
like,
it so I can
beings
look at it.
unfold as being power free. What does that look like?
Let me look at the exact line.
It's right after letting the transformation of beings other begin.
Oh yeah, it means that
What
we
does
don't,
that mean?
yeah, we let being be and be free in and of itself. We don't try to enforce power over it. We don't try to manipulate who people are. We don't try to declare that this is this. We have to be secure in all these instances. Things are a question of body count. We can manipulate the earth. That is what the question, or that is what he means when he says being is being free from power.
Okay, cool. So, specifically, in what ways is money being calculated specific to technology? Like, money is obviously different.
Yeah, let me make that explicitly clear. Heidegger does not critique technology. The question concerning technology talks about the term technic, which is very different.
Okay.
The distinction
What does
is
technic mean?
technic means like a manipulative approach, a control, like managerial approach is the words Heidegger uses.
Okay.
In which
How
we
is,
try
like,
to calculate and
How
manipulate
is
here.
using money a manipulative approach?
I mean, thinking
it's
in
like
terms-
persisted forever, and these impacts, like
Thinking about things in sheerly economic terms makes everything a question of like capital. I mean, the Mitchell evidence and I believe it's the Du Boisy evidence is very clear when he talks about, or when she talks about how when we look at economic systems and we think
Okay.
of things in terms of like economic
And
good,
this, I
economic
believe,
benefit,
as an
we
everyday
reject.
probably results in just turning the app in some way and resulting
What?
in the impacts that the app claims. Am I correct or no?
Like, there are clearly two isolated impacts in the 1NC. The first of which is a value of life claim. The second of which is a question of justification.
Be good.
Ready?
Do you need prep, Sam?
Yeah, I'll take that.
Cool. Starting now.
Prep?
Yep.
Do framework first. It's a very long one.
Click USB. Click USB. Why are you sending it over documents? Okay, I'm not gonna have prep you. Just click the USB button. Okay, got that. 16 seconds. There you go, dude. And if you can give me the flash when you all have it, that'd be greatly appreciated.
Story.
It's going to be, I'm going to start off with the framework argument. After the framework argument, I'm going to go into the permutations. I'll address them one at a time. And then after the permutation argument, I'll go down to the theoretical criticism.
Can you sign those permutations?
Yeah.
Okay.
So framework pay proper. Excellent.
And I'm just gonna make one request, which is when you signpost where you're going on the K flow, that you give me a second to get there.
Okay. Yeah, it's just going to be each permutation. We go up to
Yeah, I understand that, but I'm just saying, I'm not gonna be able to zip right, because
Okay,
I've
yeah.
got a big long flow that I gotta.
How that happened?
Is everybody ready?
Yeah. So let's go then.
First of all, go check. This is a varsity level debate. We are in outrounds. If you're not ready to debate behind the economic engagement with Mexico, Venezuela, then you should lose on presumption. To our interpretation, debate should never answer the question: do we endorse or oppose the technological mindset of the status quo? The next thing consider perhaps they have to win. That they solve the spread of legs 3. If we win the critique, we win the framework. The entire text is dissent of the framework. Did they beat the thesis or critique for the axis offense before the violence on place and the dissent? Which happens around the world. The British recognize the infinity of the lines and understand the overarching framework through which these logic of revolution are affirmed. Not only because of our micropolitical rise back tactics for resistance, but also for the method which I think the lost 29 turn the battle of the British turn the line of flight to great real change back down because the British with the name of how we did. Not as young are darkly covering a darkly possible. We don't scream no, so the us being correct. On the league, the people doing the same things. We're screaming no, life getting green cracks. The British Christ has to do opportunity to spare rare. You see, to do open the other cracks. Something come force against the strong, the flow, dating from the strong, the force of the crack. The truth and relation powers reveal more depends on the power of the speech. Full on doing will shift the power of starvation. So no more. There's nothing to another or doing. Alternative activity can equal convert into negotiation or serving the working state. It's not truly common to start doing other conditions. It is different when the negation becomes negation of creation. This is more serious challenge. Workers say no, take over the factory. No opens the time space for doing. Try to live as subject rather than object. Most careful not to convert into positive concept by giving a deep fixality. The cracks are always questions, not answers. This is more not to romanticize the cracks, get the positive force, do not possess it. This is where we start from the cracks and the fissures. We start from particular totality. We start from the world of mystery and what's the mystery of rebellions. Taking these cracks from not the United strong, the civilization, from this domination. And it's better for debate. Key to philosophical understanding education. We came there first referred to the thesis of the K first. Next with the permutation, perm, and all other instances. The other instances they reject are present in the round. You cannot reject something that doesn't exist. Argument deals with the in-round interactions which raise debaters' conceptual actions from third modes of knowledge production. This type of permutation is debate artifact with justified or criticism. They don't even name, and no one knows what these other instances they reject are. This is zero soft zero discourse effective per. They ask you to imagine criticism world of fiat. We actually criticize too. This is not argument. You wouldn't accept racism on one instance because you had the opportunity to reject it in other instances. Prove the app is undesirable, they should vote negative. 3 every instance is key. This is competing philosophy is not competitive acts, not except we read non-violence except when we don't. Go to perm, do both. It's too late. The one is the engagement framing. The representation technology offered to be introduced around. No benefit to the perm. No net benefit to the perm. 2. It's separate. It's separate other methodology. The alternative text rejects the actions such severance is voting issue. Destroys any problem making links to this. That's the case possible. Makes no countervalue competitive. On the double bind, concept rejection is key. That's Jerome. 3. The permutation of the criticism. The arrangement of the technological mindset is mutual exclusion from the examination of ontology. Dental 95. The unbridled this directive in nail life and everything that living on board orderly fast so everything goes control. The directive underlies all many quasi members that should be attempted today to exist experience. The directive of control is areas life from bars metaphysics object by the world technology shows for every process precludes the question thought the only such question acting with the nature of metaphysics. 4. Kills all solves the technological law shuts out all modes of thinking. Water 92. The technological mode of revealing as well as by the extension of modes revealing this causes a lot of the itself. It's a paradox first. Must be that allow us to speak on us, to shadow us, to scare us, to think new direction medium. Now you're dreaming in directions we may never dream. Answer the perm do all was not much mutually exclusive. First of all, like the link, the app itself and the way that the engagement does knowledge production is the link, which means that the entire app is a mode and knowledge production, which we reject, which means that the entire app is completely not mutually exclusive with the alternative. Going to the realism and realism part. What realism isn't natural, the authors are wrong. One in six is the question security scheme and 06. So security exists as a product of human activity. What is it as male, female, art, or mature, is given meaning and value, particular time, culture, specific meanings constructed in the time, and the reconstruction of data language, social conscious security is one way you can say that these will open up policies, new policies, differently open up the space for change, this power, showing social relations, security, see the social political conscious power, potential, disturbing, even threatening. This steps most ask because investors use the power to define and keep that real substance, digital, stand change to occur. And two, never really self-fulfilling policy came any forth. The greatest madness of world that leads to office and world wars, and never less perfect freedom or armed conflict. For example, regarding war, inevitable becomes inevitable expectation to determine behavior. Three, never claim never really are based off of subjective realist viewpoints. Usually critical thinking includes more and more accurate fusions than Lasky and a low 95. Theory does not take place on the fact theories play a large role in constructing and defining what the facts are, what vilified for severing instances of power, preserving status quo, classical and near-realist simply reply with their telling us the way things are. And if we try to understand the will of particular events, cost management source might include insights that might help do the resistance, investigate cause of war, might not. In the construction, internalization, masculine and military identity, methodological, all the opposition to be rethought. And then, cross-class also international racism can't change the machine, ontological. 5, turn the alternative solves the amount of the experience and hygiene. The alternative solves the ability to view being traps them in the realist perspective, down more for the breath of care, for B, a care completely mean managerial manipulation, which means for presidency of capacity, original spectrum B, by presenting, paying, around power, and not power points from memory, realistic, always from basis, from the semblance of illusion resulting from his recent abuse, and beacon of reality, driving the strokes between the powerful and the powerless. It reveals rain cannot be matched by power, super power, because they necessarily ignore the nature of basically for responsible report pathway through these obstruction, new management things, glimpse of time space of being in the interplay and in the environment to be naturally divided. And then cross-apply of our argument on like the Purdue the plan and all mutually, non-mutually exclusive parts plan, how that's the plan itself is completely mutually exclusive. And then when you told me, we do a few and go Heidegger resistance, we just said that evidence is key and we offer the alternative. That's Jeronin, leads point claim to solve that. There's no relevance. This criticizes the approach, we're not going to solve yet. Justify severance, we just justify, like, we just argue why, like, their purpose is separate out of it. We don't justify severance purpose at all. So, like, their theory.
We're not going to solve it.
They're not going to, we're not trying to solve their app.
Okay, Sam, you read like the very first part of the bill becomes criticism, but not the calculative util card, right?
No,
No,
he
not
didn't.
the calculated util card.
But the first one, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you put that at point 4 of the framework?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure.
2:30.
All right, it's going to be freight, K framework, K proper.
So what was that?
Freight, K framework, K proper.
Can I get that flash drive after you guys are done?
Yeah, without it. Here you go.
Thank you.
All right, all good to go. Are all the judges ready?
Yeah.
All right, awesome.
Extending on America's Spain press for kills the cross-border supply chain. That's conceded increase the chilling effect that drives up trade in Mexico. That's Vulcan, and that comes the economy. That's the elder reference that leads to extinction. That's Merlini. I don't need to read much more. 100% chance of extinction means you would vote affirmative. Means you would vote affirmative. Go to
The framework book.
Extend our interpretation. The rule of the ballot should be decided between plan versus the status quo or competitive policy option. This is a voting issue and will isolate three key pieces of office. One is predictability. Or interpretation is grounded in the resolution, which states that the USFG is the agent. This is the only predictable affirmative choice, or else the F will always lose to infinite starting points and arbitrary frameworks that exclude the entirety of the one. You see, as and why he never as and why I don't have to talk about my affirmative. That's probably bad. Because it turns all their education claims because there's no substantive class to get away to all education claims. Plan focus and turns to a stable locus for links in comparison. The alternatives established an agreement for the starting point of ground context. The prerequisite turns all their education claims making debate meanings. So that's Shibley. And 3 of policy and role-playing education. These are types of education that are unique to the topic and not inevitable, like a generic rapper's case. And role-playing is a form of defiant deliberative politics, reclaims the political sphere. Only way to solve the criticism is Kolinich in 97. The goal argument that it should be defined a vital component of policy that itself goal later to within the technically dominated area of having no separation between expert policy making service assistance, revision the concentration of past claims, and the defined states that as a technical goal where your critics and resistance action be defined, but the definition that the alternate evidence and standards of evaluation become topical, and framing issue the negative has conceded the state is inevitable, or refusing to use it as modern for a change means no solvency for the critique. This is an independent reason why role-playing is good. If the state is inevitable, that means we must engage in that means extend the box evidence. The alternatives abandonment and concrete policy option means they fail to solve any of the world's current problems. Once we totally abandon the government, we allow the authoritarian or reactionary release. And they say they don't see the political because they can result in future actions. But the Churchill evidence indicates, or that's on the K proper, indicates that their focus degenerates not onto issues of or benefits to comprehensive budget liabilities, dividing the left and the right, and the left against itself. Or the Churchill evidence is cross-applied from the K proper. And no matter what, this is a reason to reject the affirmative or the alternative because it's uniquely arbitrary and it points to debate the first day impacts that we should prepare to debate. We should prepare to debate this issue, even if we should be prepared to debate this issue. Fall to competing interpretations. They failed to answer any of our disadvantages to failed to answer any of the advantages to our framework coming out the block. Hold them to that they say if they win the case, they should win framework. That's backwards. You need to win framework in order to win the alternative first. That's the reason why competing interpretations are good. Next is point 4. We're boycotting that discourse. We're boycotting that the judge is the valid predestinate the role of this debate around the negative removes the judge's agency responsibility for his or ethical decisions. This turns the K. That's Kepler 95. To analyze the responsibility of everyone needs to hold it responsible for decision action without listening if there's any collective substance responsibility for consideration where the major dramas of Harper takes place obscure sexual responsibility to lead to the illusion of proliferative and underrated responsibility we have within our own sphere of action. And also to recognize the connection between political and personal decisions driven along the ideological current and prefabricated arguments of responsibility for this war. We seem to deem ourselves in a very kind of action vacuum, and that's the root cause of violence. This Kepler 95. And now our thinking is opportunity for action. The first opportunity, the first political institution reach exercise political choice responsible over the regardless of positions with the social power structure to judge and decide how we're going to act. The essentially consensual vote is to resist the fact that they have to emphasize that the judge is the ballot and the ballot is the criticism. It destroys judges' personal agency via the fact that it's predestining the role of the ballot. Go to K proper. Conceded permutation means that they cannot win the debate. Extended permutation do the play while recognizing we are doing it for the wrong reason. We're doing it for the wrong reasons. That's on the realistic predictability debate. That's also 100% of the case, or 100% of their criticism. The key to mobilize effective change. It's good to do the right thing for the wrong reason. We apologize for the gendered language. It's Zelensky in 71. The organizers will organize themselves to be comfortable in a subordinate situation. Rationality, rationalize. It's vitally can be able to work with the rationality for the purpose of change. This fight with the winningly organized and accept the right. A reason is only interested in moral rationalization at the right is at the end, it's been achieved. What do you want, Cole?
Oh, I just tell him where the is.
Yeah, that was.
Oppenheimer.
Yeah, and they say, or they, which one do you want example?
Oh, no, just keep moving.
Which one? Okay. Extend the math and the evidence indicates they have no mechanism to enact the rule for the only thing they answer this way. The only thing they answer they say it's a methodology question. They still need something. They still need a mechanism in order to enact it. If there's no mechanism to enact the alternative, that means that since all this also goes forth and furthers the self the opposite. The alternative is it can only exist in theoretical world. Heidegger's rule 3 can't be enacted because it does not have a mechanism. It may work in theory, and the arguments may still apply, but it definitely doesn't. That's
Graham 99 too.
what's
They just say that there's no warrant, but
what's the Graham evidence?
ontology squad.
Or except the Graham evidence, nuclear, or their ontology is flawed because nuclear war has to reverse it. Extinction comes before value to life. You can't have value to life if there's dead, and value to life is inevitable. That was on the bottom of the trace.
You have 17 seconds.
Yeah, 1 second, I just have to. Okay, starting.
All right.
Cool. It's going to be criticism followed by framework. Cool. Is it okay if I sit here for my speech?
I mean, whatever, I won't be able to hear you, but
Oh, you won't? I will stand up then. That's what I was asking for. Cool. Everybody ready? This debate comes down to a question of methods and the interpretation I provided and my partner provided on the one in our framework. The debate should be about the answer, the question of the assumption of the affirmative policy-making framework, and whether or not it endorses the technological mindset, and whether or not that's good. There is no affirmative in the round. We do not. The question is, do you endorse or oppose the technological mindset of the affirmative plan? Now, we are the criticism, of the affirmative plan. Now, there are two methods presented in the debate. The method of the technological mindset that first approach policy without asking an ontological question. The secondary of asking the ontological question and then approaching policy action. That's going to be an important question on framework. First, let's go down the framework flow. They conceded all of our link analysis with me. The way they approach their affirmative plan is technological. First of which they look at it in sheerly economic terms and try to control the economy. That's our de Bourdieu evidence. They also concede Swazo. Then they look at politics. They first proceed in ontology. Without first questioning ontology, we replicate the same type of politics that we see again and again. They conceded the Mitchell evidence, which said that the drive to create security in our world is just to merely trying to calculate and try to remove all negative deviation and try to remove all difference in the world, and that turns the root cause of war. That's our Berkey evidence. This all goes conceded, meaning the only way they're going to gain an impact is through the criticism. They also concede the analysis that I did of the Caputo evidence, which I say that form of technological mindset removes the value of life, and also it justifies all the impacts of the affirmative plan. That's going to be extremely important on the framework flow, but also first I'm going to answer they say value to life is inevitable. They concede all my pushing out arguments in which the Caputo evidence describes how people get pushed out of the system when they're not recognized by anybody else as being valuable within the system. That kills the value of life. Also, it still justifies all the impacts. Now, they say we conceded the permutation, but my partner did not concede the permutation. In fact, read a bunch of cards on the realism day that go completely conceded they conceded the Dolmar and 04 evidence, which says that the state and realism are not inevitable. However, their form of talking about inevitably makes it inevitable. There's also this Zakolsky and Low in 95 evidence, which says that having an ontological question allows us to break past from the old type of politics and embrace a new form of politics that is different than technological mindset. That's going to turn the permutation. Also, they conceded all the analysis on the other permutation, which still applies. First of which is to their framing was already introduced in the one I see. They can't just sever out. They conceded that severance is a voting issue. They should be voted down on that alone because they're severing out of the representation they brought into the round. They still link to the criticism. Have that analysis above. Also, that trying to do both kills the solvency because we're not constantly doing. That's the Dronin evidence. That's the McWhorter evidence. That one conceded my partner. Now they say there's no mechanism, but they extend the Holloway evidence from the framework flow, which is very specific on this. How ballots can be used to embrace our type of method within the debate round, which allows us to solve in the round. We are critiquing the way that you approach policy making in this debate round. The way you came in and frame the affirmative plan. That means that the method would be the affirmative would be a negative ballot in this debate round that also solved that. Their criticism, more so their own evidence, very specific, their radical rejection, and enough to solve now. They say ontology is flawed because the nukes first, but we still turn the justification. I already explained the value to life debate. If there's no reason to live if you don't have value to life, in fact, that's a negative thing. It's worse to keep on living. They conceded that analysis. Now go to the framework flow. Extend our interpretation that before approaching policy-making decisions, we have to have an ontological question. This is fundamentally different and exclusive from the affirmative plan. Now, there are two conceding the impacts. The first of which is that their education is flawed. It's going to reproduce the impacts that they isolate in the 1AC time and time again. That's the Suazo evidence. We read that in the 1AC, and that goes conceded, meaning the only way that we can create and change politics and not replicate their affirmative harm is through a different policy-making discussion in which we approach ontology first. That turns their predictability argument. They may be predictable, but that means they're also going to replicate the affirmative impacts. That's the Suazo evidence goes conceded. They say it's key to education, but our Geronin evidence and the Olson evidence that we read at the end of the 1AC is very specific on how education predetermines the type of ontology. By creating ontological questioning before approaching policy-making discussion, we are able to move forward and have a better form of education because we're able to understand the people we are helping and why we are helping, the meaning behind doing it. Ontology is a prerequisite to any form of educational policy. That also goes conceded. Now they say that they're key to solving the case. That's Culmination 97 education. We can still use policy making, but first we have to approach it with ontological questioning. They conceded that they do not approach it with ontological questioning first, which is why we are critiquing the method that they use in this debate. They say the state is inevitable. My partner did answer that with a realism debate, which she said that inevitability claims make it inevitable. Second of which is that it doesn't matter if the state's inevitable. We can still approach the state if we have ontological questioning first. Are not mutually exclusive. They say extend see the political. They conceded our uniqueness claim. The political has already been ceded. The right has taken over. Look at the wars and the calculations that are happening. More so, we allowed it to change. Our Suazo evidence from 1NC is very specific on how our form of ontological questioning allows us to break from the old form of policy, create something better. That turns their impact. Also, we're able to solve it back because the justification of the technological mindset makes it so that their extinction scenario is possible. They say they must win or beat the K before they win framework because our K is a K of their type of framework. They say the judge of the ballot, and they read this capital critique. We're not calling you the ballot. We're saying you can use your ballot as a method of embracing ontological questioning first. It's a question of method in the debate. The debate comes down to this. They conceded that policymaking is going to fail in status quo. The only way to break away from that and to not have their impacts be justified again and again is the first ontological question. That has been conceded since the first speech. Don't let them get back from that.
You have 230.
freight. Okay, proper.
Side, improper, all right.
Framework.
Oh, yeah. My hands are like cut up, so why don't you?
Yeah.
Technology.
My hands are pretty sweaty, guys.
Come up.
First on first, you can extend that jobs would be destroyed in the Hungmire, and that would lead to a chilling effect. That's what market indicates, and that's key to the freight industry. We don't have to do any work costs. Apply the above analysis on how the freight industry is key to the economy. That solves economic war really need. Okay, proper. On the perm, do the plan for the wrong reasons. First of all, they try to make a severance argument, but it's not severance because we're doing all of the plan, literally all the plan, and this is key to solve. They concede Zelensky in 71 on this question. That's key to morality because even though they concede this, and you might not like voting on this argument, the only way to have ethical policy is introduce it for after the right ends have been met. This goes conceded in this debate. Otherwise, it sandbags the entirety of the two era. There's no way they can come back from this because it's not a severance plan. There's no reason to reject the argument in this instance. The right reason is only introduced as a moral rationalization at the right end has been achieved. The plan sustains this because we can still have a value to life, because value to life is this. They get no linear dissent against this. We don't even need framework to win this because we literally don't need to do the alt in this instance.
Go to B.
Oh, secondly, they say the cross-supply, the framework arguments are here, but our framework is key, our framework interpretation is key to be consequential to debate, which is key to garner what's good or bad, and that's also more the net benefit to the permutation because it's the right ends argument. And because then they can't access their interpretation framework. Extend the interpretation that the role of the ballot is decided between the plan versus the status quo competitive policy option. They drop every single point on this, on why it's a dissent. First, the predictability dissent. Our interpretation is grounded within the resolution as the United States federal government is the agent. This is the only predictable thing. There's a reason why the topic comes out every year. The United States federal government is always the actor. Otherwise, we lose infinite starting points, and it creates arbitrary frameworks so that it can exclude the entirety of the 1AC because we have nothing to base the plan on, and there's no plan focus anymore. That turns any of their education claims into
No, it's not an issue of transfer education claims. It's an issue of the
It's an issue of the
affirmative would always lose.
that the affirmative
They
always
concede
loses
it's an issue of
because
competing interpretation.
they've conceded that it's an issue of competing interpretations. This goes into the education claims on why plan focuses just because established a starting point.
Don't go for anything.
And for that,
The role playing.
first, role-playing is specifically extend the Kuchin's evidence that it's a goal-oriented debate is seen in defiant mode in performative politics. This goal-oriented debate is good because it's a technological arena, and they concede the capital framing issue. The negatives concede the state is enough of refuting using a modern for change means no self and see for the criticism. An independent reason why the role-playing is good. We in the state is not only we must engage extensively political left. There we go.
Okay, just say their answer to predictability
Their
was
answer to
insufficient. They
predictability
conceded the affirmative is always going to lose.
First step benefit of the framework, though, the boycott of the role of value, predestining the role of judge, removes your individual responsibility to ethical decision making. That's what Kepler indicates. Deciding others, change your person, knowledge, destroy individual agents. We want you to change in the debate committee. You have to make them a conscientious decision to make them. We cannot wait for have other debaters tell us to vote or not on a certain way. Delegating the only scenario change is voting on a project after destroys the same individual cannot have the debate community. And Kepler says, don't drift along the ideological current is pre-fabricated. We EU are the war. Voting neg is literally writing RFD because they told me so, and this destroys your judge agency, and you have no ethical decision making at that point, which means that they can't access their claims on the critique on what is ethical and what is not ethical, so they can't access any of the burden. Voting is conscientious to make a difference in the debate community. Our second piece is the capital evidence indicates that the root cause of violence, you only justify atrocity when you personally are to blame. In terms of 100% of the case, the reason why you have problems in debate is because you don't feel personally responsible and therefore have no incentive to change. This specifically, he talks
talks about, and this goes conceited. Secondly, their ontology is flawed. Can flow this. Swazo is specifically dictated within their ontology. First of all, cross-applying Murray here because they don't have a specific action to do this, so we have to look to the value of life. Isn't that because we need to be able to live in this instance? They have no mechanism to enact their worldview in this question. And arguments towards, because Heidegger is grounded in metaphysics, obscures the rule of social and promotes kind of politics that identity politics. This is bad because thinkers halts progress of thought. It means that you can't access the thought claims that they try to have within this debate, and that is bad for debate because it once again destroys your personal agency. You can cross-apply that. They concede the predictability that the AF would lose every round. They concede frameworks competing interpretation. You vote AF for competitive equity in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you.